What up? Welcome, Golden Era Podcast, Free Agency, Day 5. We're coming to you in the aftermath of the fifth trade of free agency, the fifth one, without question, being the largest, most impactful one. Luka Doncic headed to the Milwaukee Bucks. So in the aftermath of the Bucks dealing Malik Hightower to Phoenix, the question mark was, they didn't get a lot back. What exactly are they doing here? Are they retooling around Dwayne Qualls? Are they preparing to rebuild around Dwayne Qualls? Malik Hightower was fantastic for Milwaukee last season. When he was healthy, he missed half the season, but when he was healthy, he was averaging 20 points per game. Well, we now know they are moving Brandon Boston, his $40 million expiring contract, to Memphis, along with Quintel Mason, rookie Taron Evans. He was the 13th pick in the summer's draft, and Ricky Jacobs, plus a 2036 top 10 protected first. So Luka, the big hurdle to get anybody to obtain Luka Doncic was his contract. He's owed around $50 million. That, you can look across the league, you say Boston should have gotten him, Charlotte should have gone after him, Phoenix should have put some pieces into the pot to try to get him. The money is the hardest thing for him to get that deal across, and Brandon Boston, who's in his 30s, doesn't have a ton of market right now, obviously, because of his contract, is about the only thing that you could come up with if you're the Bucks or if you're the Grizzlies to get Luka Doncic. So, what does this mean for Memphis? This one's easy. The teardown's underway. Ja Morant's in Miami. Luka Doncic is in Milwaukee. You didn't get anything for Ja because he left via free agency. It's the cataclysmic event of Kareem Robinson leaving Boston is the same thing that's impacting Memphis here. But you get Taron Evans, 13th pick. I said in the draft reaction show I wasn't a huge fan of him going 13th overall. That's the piece that you're getting. So technically you're looking at 2 first-round picks in this deal. One of them is a top 10 protected pick 3 years from now, so it's not the most desirable. But look, this is where Memphis sits. It's a rebuild. They're going to have to do it on their own. Maybe you can try to flip Brandon Boston at the trade deadline. I think that's where you would do it. You're going to run into the same challenge of finding money to make it work. But at the very least, you've got a guy, you've got a player that's probably got some value if teams can string together the money necessary. Milwaukee. Obviously, they are not tearing down and rebuilding and moving Dwayne Qualls. This is now the third time that they've made a move, third time, if you include Malik Hightower, that they've made a move to try to make this team a playoff team. Hasn't worked so far. Luka Doncic is most certainly the best of the players that they're going to be adding to this group. If this doesn't work, the Bucks can't say anything except that they tried. I like the protection of a top 10 pick in 2036, but Milwaukee got better. And now if you look at this team, of course they got the addition of Marcus Young Jr. He's going to help as a defensive wing. They got him in the Malik Hightower deal. You've got Jules Petrus. You've got Adrian Harper at the 5. You've got Mario Zoric at the 5. This team, in a league that doesn't have a lot of starting caliber 5s, with Jules Petrus potentially being one, they've got 3 guys that can start at the 5. This is a team that should make... I wouldn't be surprised if they make another move during the season as injuries come into play and that center position becomes a lot more valuable. But this is a better team. It's a better team. If you look across the league of all the trades that happened, and we'll get to the 5th one in a second, I don't know that this is the best trade. I think the Jason Sanders deal to Sacramento is. But it's a pretty good one, and it might be the second best. I like what Luka Doncic is bringing. Yes, he's in his mid-30s. Yes, Dwayne Qualls is in his mid-20s. The timeline doesn't quite add up, but we've seen the veteran with a young player combination work. It's worked splendidly in Phoenix, back-to-back conference finals since the addition of Cade Cunningham. I think the Bucks have a chance here with the addition of Luka Doncic to do the same. And then the second deal, that went down on day 4 of free agency. I'm not going to give you an update on every single signing. A lot of the notable ones have come and gone now. But technically the 4th in timeline order, but we're talking about it next, is the Spurs finally get a point guard. They go out, they get Sidney Cross, three-team deal with Denver and Houston. Cross, a former number 3 overall pick years ago for the Nets. He was in Denver. He's a 20-point-per-game scorer. It's a good addition for a team that needed somebody to operate. The Spurs tried to get Sidney Cross at last year's trade deadline. That was well reported. They didn't end those pursuits. That comes together now. All told, the Nuggets are giving up Sidney Cross. The Spurs are getting Sidney Cross and Kareem Livingston via Houston, a former 3rd overall pick in his own right, bit of a bust at that position. They're going to San Antonio. The Spurs are sending a top 5 protected first in 2034, so in next summer's draft, I would expect that to convey. And Landon West, who's a nice backup point guard, to Denver. And then Killian Hayes is getting sent along with second-round picks in 2035 and 37 to the Rockets. Hayes, great facilitator, 7-8 assists per game. Can't score to save his life, 3 to 4 points per game. It just wasn't what the Spurs needed. The Spurs needed another scoring point guard. That's what Sidney Cross brings them. Sidney Cross is not going to get confused with being a All-NBA or even an All-Star point guard. But he's a very talented starting level point guard. There's not a lot of them in the league at the asking price that you get. A first-round pick that you could expect to be in the 20s and a couple seconds to move off of a pretty bad contract in Killian Hayes and to bring Sidney Cross in, to pair him with Carlos Fernandez, to pair him with Mateo Delgado. That's a really good starting 3 right now for the Spurs. I think Kareem Livingston is a good starter for this team at the 3. Mateo Delgado will be at the 4. Is San Antonio a top 4 team? I don't think this does that. I don't think it does that, but what it does do is it puts the Spurs in position, if Mateo Delgado continues that leap that he started last season during the playoffs against the Suns, if he continues that trajectory at 29, which we don't typically see, this team should contend for a top 6 seed. They should be outside of the play-in, which they survived last season to get the 7 seed. This is a top 6 team with the potential to go higher than that. How much higher? I don't know. The West is brutal, man. We've talked about it previously. The Western Conference had a run where it was just not as good. The East was 10 deep, and the West was Golden State and kind of the Thunder a little bit. It's changed. The Warriors, the Suns, the Lakers, the Jazz, the Spurs, the Kings. I mean, that's top 6 that any single one of them could win an NBA championship. You can make an argument for any single one of them to come out of the West. The Spurs are now, like I said, are in that group. It's an improvement. We'll see if it pays off. As always, make sure you're tuning in on Operation Sports. We've got free agency recaps from The Athletic are over there for days 4 and 5. Also, some Summer League breakdown. I'm not going to break down a ton of Summer League here on the podcast, but you can catch some of that from the writers over at The Athletic. Great piece pre-Jason Sanders deal from ESPN's Ryan Breeshurst about where potentially he could go, so there's going to be more on that coming out over there. This is the end of the summer. This is off-season wrap-up. So here on the podcast, we're going to be jumping in to Day 6 will be over on Operation Sports of Free Agency as we wrap up there. And then we're breaking into player breakdowns, top 50 players, top 5 tiers, broken up over 5 episodes. That's on the horizon. So make sure you're tuning in over there, subscribing, liking, comment. Please, appreciate you following along. And we'll catch you with player tier rankings coming up next.